And I think that when you're now starting off, or even if you are any project that you want or anything in life, it's better to be able to have those small wins, get engagement, rather than to force it down somebody's throat. Or if you're in an existing business, or if you're in a new business, trying to do too much will have unintended consequences, whether it be like your family, whether it be your time, your sleep, or your health. So the biggest thing that I learned was really is to get those small wins, right? Start off small and slowly build momentum.
From Caribbean Ideas in Trinidad and Tobago, this is Uptick, a part of the Caribbean Innovation Content Network. Uptick is a show that brings you the stories of Caribbean entrepreneurs and corporate innovators that are building the next generation of great companies. These are the stories you don't typically hear of how these leaders are working to build brands and businesses that can not only impact the Caribbean world, but also have an impact on the global business stage. Their stories will move you, inspire you, push you to take action, and perhaps spark your next big idea. I'm your host, Chike Farah. On the one hand, I bet many Caribbean entrepreneurs out there wish that they had an opportunity to inherit a great brand and business that a family member had built up, where they wouldn't have the stress of figuring out every single thing from scratch. And that's the opportunity that today's guest had. But when you really think about it, it's also incredibly hard to take on something that someone else has built and come into it, stamp your own ideas onto it, and also take it further into new waters. Today we'll explore the journey that Alex Siu Chong has taken. Alex is CEO of Excellent Stores, a department store operation that was started by his grandfather in Trinidad, but that is now operating in multiple markets around the Caribbean. But there's much more to this story. You see, this is a time when Caribbean businesses can't hide from global competition, reaching us right on our doorsteps. It's a time when rapidly evolving tools, technologies, and techniques threaten to make almost every business in every sector disappear unless the leaders and employees of those businesses have the courage to learn and then master those very disruptive technologies and techniques. And that's what I love about Alex's journey. In his case, it was a need to embrace e-commerce as a retailer in the face of not just local but global competition, including Amazon. You see, he recognized that regardless of whether you're leading the smallest startup or the largest pan-regional corporation, that today's Caribbean leader must be prepared to take on global competition that is far bigger, has more resources, and that if you aren't equal parts careful and brave, will crush you without a moment's thought. In the process, he's tackled the challenge of stepping into big shoes and facing the high expectations not just from those who've come before, but the high expectations of a rapidly changing Caribbean consumer base. And what I love about his evolving story is that, like every innovator I talk to, he's been willing to shift approach and pivot. He's been willing to persevere through all manner of challenge, and all of this while maintaining a commitment to a core mission and purpose. He is today's guest on the new Season 2 of the Uptick Caribbean podcast. He is Alex Siu Chong, CEO of Excellent Stores. All right. Well, very excited for this conversation to catch up with my good friend Alex Siu Chong of Excellent Stores on this Uptick podcast today, featuring another Caribbean innovator who's doing really interesting things. So welcome, Alex. Great to have you.
Thank you, Chike, and welcome to all the listeners. I'm happy to be on.
All right, great. Well, as we've been diving into these conversations in season 2, there have been a few themes that have been really interesting. We're recording this now, almost a year into pandemic at the start of 2021. And this season, we're really exploring themes around perseverance, around purpose, around, pivoting and some of the evolutions that people are making. So I know there's going to be some really interesting things to talk about on all of those topics. But why don't we just sort of start with, I always like to get into the origin story of all of the superheroes that, we talk to. So Alex, tell us a little bit about, where you grew up, where in the Caribbean you grew up, and your background and your journey towards running a major retail and e-commerce operation.
Sure, and thanks for having me again, Chike. I mean, I think that our story really began with my grandparents coming off the ship as immigrants from China and landed in Port of Spain, Trinidad. Actually, they eventually went to San Fernando in South Trinidad, and most of the life back then was just really trying to survive and look for a new life and look for new changes. With what was happening in China at the time, where there was this extreme poverty, there was a lot of invasion with Japan at the time, wars, and looking for a new life. So coming to Trinidad was really a new start and a new beginning. And one of the things that my grandparents always told us is that you need to be able to provide value in anything that you do. You need to do everything that you do has to be excellent work, because as Chinese people are generally known for, it's hard workers. And the one thing that they brought to our family and our family values is continuing to do hard work. So they actually started off working in a shirt factory, right? And eventually, when the shirt factory went belly up, they had saved up enough money with all the coins and putting it under their pillows and what have you, and they bought out the first shirt factory. So that was 62 years ago, back in 1958. We're into our 63rd year now. And essentially, as they bought the shirt factory, they then opened an import business, right? Bring in goods from China. And, most people in the Caribbean would know those tie-dye types of slippers, that we all wore as kids, right? So it started off as a variety store. Essentially, my grandparents and my uncles were all in the business. My dad is one of six boys, and that was life. And when I came along, it was also life. We would, after school, we would have to go to work, and we have to go to the shop, and we have to pack the shelves, and we have to go to the warehouse. And in fact, I recall as a toddler, our room where everyone slept was also slash a warehouse. So we had boxes upon boxes and a little mattress on the floor. So eventually the business grew. My father came back from university from Canada in 1975 and grew the business from a variety store to an excellent stores, which is actually the department store retail. So from a one store to a 4 or 5 store network with a shirt factory actually, and then I came back in 2012 with the mandate essentially to transform and modernize the company, all its underlying processes, expand the local markets, where we've lost market share, and then use that technology and the infrastructure that we've now built into expanding into regional markets. And here we are today.
Wow, and that's fascinating. I love to hear kind of that multi-generational aspect. I think my father, before he passed away, he used to say to me that I stood on the shoulders of my father, and I want you to stand on mine, and kind of create that generational thing. A lot of the times when I talk with people on uptick, I usually go, okay, who was your influence, or who were your influences that sort of led you to being, at least in this case, an entrepreneurial journey. And in your case, you clearly have multiple generations of that. So you talked about one aspect that has been kind of consistent, which is delivering value. What other things did you see at a young age from from some of your influences, parents, grandparents, that you have brought forward to how you lead today?
That's a great question, Chike. Other than perseverance and hard work, right, which we've sort of established already, the biggest thing is really honesty and integrity. When I think back to my grandparents and even my dad, one of the biggest things that they've always instilled in us is that you never do anything that would tarnish your name. You never do anything that would hurt other people. And at the end of the day, treat others as you'd like to be treated. So in a lot of Caribbean islands, and a lot of these smaller independent states, where we're separated from the world and what have you, and many things can happen, right? It's easy for somebody to grease your hand, to let things happen, and especially when there's a significant amount of inefficient infrastructure in place, right? But the one thing that my grandparents and certainly my parents did is that they would never get involved in that, and what you need to do is that when you do business, right, or anything that you do, how you treat your staff on the floor, how you treat your employees, you have to do it with honesty and integrity. And that is something that I think that we've lived by, and I would never do anything right now. God forbid I do anything that would tarnish my grandparents' good name. So that has lasted us for 62 years, and we're hoping that that will continue with that good work ethic combined with the perseverance and so on for another 62 years.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think you mentioned that your father had gone away to study, and I know that I think we both after St. Mary's went to Canada. Tell us a little bit about your studies and your work in Canada before coming back. What were some of the things that you learned that because I know as we've talked over the years that there are certainly aspects of that experience that it was sort of like go learn and then come back and bring that, but then merge that into what you do. That's an interesting thing to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that moving to Canada was probably one of the best things for me. We were fortunate that we had two generations of family in the business already. So a lot of people knew my name, and a lot of people knew who my father was. So moving to Canada was a really great experience because no one knew who I was. And I had to fight to go to school. I had to get my own part-time job. I had to go take the bus just like everybody else. And when sometimes you're young and you run out of money, well, that's too bad. You are out of money. So it was a great experience. I went to University of Toronto at Scarborough. We took business, and essentially I moved into the accounting path in that stream. And what I found was that was certainly an excellent way to get into business, because everything has to go through the books. And if it's not on the books, then something's funny going on. So it's very, very, I worked with KPMG and some other small and medium-sized accounting firms, and got a variety of experience from owner-managed businesses, focusing on small businesses particularly, as well as financial institutions, and doing a couple of forensic audits, so you can see where things can go wrong. I do believe that that provided a significant basis for me going forward, a breadth of experience. And then I joined Sobeys, which is the third largest grocery in Canada in grocery retail. One of the defining moments, I think, in my career working there. I spent about 6 years within the marketing department as the finance lead. We launched a loyalty program, a credit card, and a data analytics warehouse. So being one member of a 10-person team and trying to launch this across the country was certainly one of the highlights of my career. And because it was so intense, and because grocery is perishable, you have to have good processes in place. You have a significant amount of competition, and it was very stressful. So bringing a lot of those insights and experience back home was certainly, it was certainly great for my development and my career. And then bringing that back home, how do I implement a lot of these learnings and adapt it to local Caribbean culture, and what some of the challenges that we have, and how do we adjust to suit.
Right. So when you came back, so you came back in a finance role initially, and then kind of eventually assumed kind of full leadership from there.
That's correct. Yes. I started off as the controller, right? Doing the books, the debits and credits, and making sure I reported on the numbers. And at the same time, I then moved into the CFO role, and then within now about a year and a half, I've then taken over the CEO role over all of our retail operations. And my parents have then moved into managing the real estate properties. So I now have full control over all of our retail businesses and all the programs and activities and the underlying processes that support the retail business here locally, as well as when we had moved to St. Lucia. We was our first expansion out of Trinidad and Tobago. We had established an Excellent Stores retail branch in 2018 in St. Lucia.
Great. Yeah, when I did Uptick season 1, a lot of the conversations were with folks who were, in more emerging businesses, and they were kind of getting going. There were some years in, and they were kind of expanding. And this year, I decided to take things in a different direction and have a little bit more of a mix of folks who are still in that stage, and then folks like yourselves, where it's a very well established, much larger operation. I think that people can learn from every stage. And but one of the things that's interesting about your experience is that while you were coming into an established, or a long established business, you were charged with and tasked with, as you said, modernizing this business, right? And in retail in particular, I mean, certainly for me, spent a lot of time in North America and the States in terms of my professional career. You see the rise of Amazon. I mean, wife and family from Seattle, so I've literally seen how Amazon has changed the skyline of Seattle, and you've had to contend with that. Talk a little bit about, first, I guess, just the competitive pressures and change from being, as you said, in our own sort of Caribbean bubble, kind of protected, a little bit offset from the world, to in your industry. I mean, look, it's like, order it online, it comes to the skybox, and so on. So you really had to adapt not just to local competition, but to global competition. What has that experience been like, as a leader of a business? How have you kind of managed that challenge?
Sure. I mean, I think as you said, the online shopping within the Caribbean, it's been around for more than a decade, and what we found is that it was a significant transformation of customers' behavior and habits, and essentially what you're looking at is that you have a disconnect. People were already shopping online and they were getting their online experiences from Amazon. However, in a local market, there was just a habit of coming into stores. But as stores became, as traffic started increasing, as people's lives started getting busier, you don't no longer have that habit of physically walking into store. You have a screaming child in the back, so something had to change. And the only option that you had was then to go online and then order from Amazon. So one of the major issues that we had within the country at the time is that you have a significant foreign exchange leakage. And at the time, roughly around 2013 and 14, the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago had estimated about 500 million US dollars leaves Trinidad and Tobago to pay for credit card payments. For a small country, for 500 million US dollars leaving for credit card payments, that's certainly significant. So for our organization, while yes, I did come into a legacy business, it almost seemed like it was even more difficult because you had a business that was established for 50 years at the time, right? And we had all our staff, the culture was geared only to physical stores. And even for modernizing it, what it meant is that you had to introduce computers and you had to introduce barcodes and you had to introduce a lot of data. So I remember speaking to my warehouse manager, and she was like, "You want me to use a computer? Right? What is that computer? Is it going to take away my job or eat me? Or like I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the fact is that you had a huge cultural shift. So although you had a legacy business, it almost was very difficult. Now you had 50 years of ingrained processes and habit. And what we found, it was difficult because even when we launched our online site in 2014, uh, everyone from my parents down to the warehouse manager to the branch managers would just ship all the goods out to the branches, and then we had nothing for e-commerce. So what we found was almost all the goods were paid for already, but they were sold in the stores and we couldn't fulfill them. So it really was a cultural transformation, more so than it was a digital transformation, and that
Right.
certainly was one of the challenges.
How did you go about, navigating? Because yeah, change management, I mean, even for us at Caribbean Ideas, different industry or different, sector, smaller company. But when we made the shift from being digital only to full service, tons of change management and challenge to kind of help people adapt and so on. How did you approach that? What worked? What didn't work? Where did you bump your head? Where, what did you find in terms of that formula over time?
Well, first of all, I think what we needed to do was we needed to be able to show proof that this e-commerce thing, that the computer was actually working. And what it meant was that getting metrics, we needed data, and we needed to be able to establish the link between For example, when you just sent out an email blast, right? How do we then link those emails to those customers to the actual click through, right, and the conversion of those sales, right? So then showing that you can do an email blast for next to nothing, right, as opposed to putting an ad in the paper. Right? So, and then you can therefore start to generate activities that this is directly related. And for example, within specific categories, we were able to sell out all our agent inventory because we did specific, identifiable, and trackable promotions. So that was certainly the one thing that we needed to be able to do that, to be able to prove it. And then the second thing that we needed to do really was more on a total transformation of how using the computer and using automated processes actually makes your life a lot easier. You can find the item exactly in the warehouse where it's supposed to be, and if it's not there, then somebody has taken it. So it made life a lot easier by demonstrating small wins. But when you had to do that for close to 90,000 items, even more so, the data became more and more important. So now you now have a huge sample set where you have millions of data points. And then we had to collate that information into a summary form to say, look what the computer did. It
Mm-hmm.
found where we were losing a ton of money.
Right, and you got that buy-in. So yeah, so I mean, there's a couple interesting things inside there, because I hear elements of sort of, small wins, test and learn. I hear elements of data and analytics as well, and just sort of like bringing in that data culture, which is a huge way, and sort of like show and prove along the way to kind of change minds, change habits, which is pretty powerful. How did that manifest on the customer end? Because as you said, customers were already adapting and so on, but they were accustomed to looking externally for what they wanted and bringing it in. So you've had to try to go on this journey to establish yourself as a credible alternative sitting here in the local market. So how have you managed that? How have you had to kind of achieve that? Similar things, different tactics? How did you do that?
Well, from the customer side, one of the biggest things that we had was trust, because what we found was that more people felt comfortable placing their credit card, with Amazon or PayPal, and no local company can ever be good enough than my favorite Amazon site. So, so from a customer perspective, there's a couple of things that we needed to do. One, we needed to demonstrate that we have secure payments, and through our local bank and through First Atlantic Commerce was at the time, and we still use First Atlantic Commerce, show that your credit card's transaction are secure. Second thing is that we needed to be able to use search engine optimization to be able to get up on top of the Google searches. So people say, oh, they're looking for a baby monitor, right? Boom, Excellent Stores has it. And then you can get the item within 2 to 4 days, as opposed to waiting for the Skybox, which probably could take a week. And if something went wrong for whatever reason, you can come into any particular store and still get the warranty. So that was the second thing in terms of being able to sort of have it locally available and online and getting up in their face wherever they're searching. And I think the last thing was really to be able to, from a pricing standpoint, we needed to demonstrate that when you're looking online and you're making that decision to purchase on Amazon, say it says $5, right, 5 US. Most people do a straight conversion, say, what, 5 US? Wow, that's so cool, right? That's so cheap. But even though some people know that they have to pay a Skybox charge and an air freight charge and customs and duties, those don't really add up when you're making the purchase decision. So we had to go on an education campaign, and even right now, every 2 years, what we do is that we take about 200 items across Amazon that we sell. We do a comparison, and we actually purchase those items on Amazon, land them in different Skybox companies, and demonstrate that we are about 30 to 40% cheaper still, because we buy direct from the manufacturer, we have economies of scale, and we use ocean freight. So at the end of the day, the landed cost is 30 to 40% cheaper. We're not cheaper on everything, but it certainly is an education campaign and getting people on board to say, oh, show me the numbers, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the themes that some for some people they feel that the word is overused after the pandemic, which is pivoting. But I always kind of talk about, when you're going somewhere in a sailboat. Not that I'm an expert sailor, but I like the analogy. You kind of tack left, tack right. You kind of fix your eyes on a destination. You kind of go in a winding way. And one of the things that you've done and you recently announced, is pulling back from some of your brick and mortar locations, closing some of those stores, and really pushing even more chips in on e-commerce. So even though you've been on this journey, as you've mentioned, since 2014, and so it's not like it's a sudden change, but still that was a little bit of a shock to the market, or to some people in the market, and to some of the customers. That's a pretty big shift. Can you talk a little bit about the path of getting to that decision? I know it wasn't just because of the pandemic, but talk a little bit about coming to that place, and making a decision that was that big.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, Chike, because it wasn't a decision as a result of the pandemic. You had a decade of shifting customer behavior, right? And what we were looking at was adoption. As more people got on to the e-commerce train, if you will, then we would continue to ramp up our activities there. With the pandemic, it's just really accelerated that, and when you now have a the country in Trinidad and Tobago going through a prolonged recession going on for about 3 or 4 years now. You have lower customer traffic in the stores, and now you slap on a pandemic, and people are definitely not coming out, or you have less than half of the foot traffic that you did before. All of a sudden now it just becomes extremely uneconomical to operate these larger bricks and mortar stores. So for and what we did find was that there was, on average, we're getting about 1,400% increases on our e-commerce platform. You have 60,000 new visitors every month, right? And then you have conversion rates that are starting to go into the double digits. So, and even triple digits depending on certain months. So it became a no-brainer very quickly, is that from an economic standpoint, if we now have limited resources, if we now have limited foreign exchange, why am I continuing to fight, and burn all this cash, overdraft facilities, and stretch my limited foreign exchange into these 6 massive bricks and mortar stores that no longer can be sustainable from a foot traffic and a top line sales basis. You don't have the top line, you can't pay your rent. So at the end of the day, it really became a survival move. But at the same time, although you're reducing your expenditures, what you're now doing is that you now actually have the ability and the resources to continue to enhance the customer experience, delivery, logistics, and invest more into technology in those physical stores to enhance the customer experience and make it so much better than what it is. And that's on the physical stores. And on
Right.
the online side, definitely on that too as well, we can invest more. So I think it was happening, but the pandemic just, accelerated it
push it,
significantly.
push it over the line. Yeah, the marketing guy in me gets intrigued about the implications for brand, and certainly one of the other things you said, CX, or customer experience, because with some customers you're going to have that in store, sort of direct relationship. Other customers you're not. So I'm curious about how you see customer connection, particularly with the customers who new customers you might be reaching, that are really interacting with you only in a more online e-commerce scenario. Or how are you thinking about that from a marketing standpoint as you go forward?
Again, a great question. I think that because our business is a legacy business, it also is multi-generational. So you have a wide cross section of customers, from people that are my parents' age that are getting into their 70s, right? And you also now have the up and coming young kids. Most of the kids now, right, especially in this pandemic, they have some sort of device. And at the end of it, while we're actually not targeting children, right? What you're thinking is that, how then do you integrate all these different experiences to be able to get things and allow people to know our brand. The thing, what we have to do is that we have to find that balance between a truly omni-channel approach. So we have those people like my parents' age and grandparents who have the habit of coming in stores, and they will continue to come in stores, and therefore that's why a physical network will continue to be very important. But you now have many different types of new users who are looking for something local, economical, but at the same time have a similar experience that you have with Amazon. So if you have something that becomes very, very easy, so you have a lot of the kids who are like 13 and up, for example, that have phones, right, and then can send products to their parents to go and buy. Those are the things that we need to be able to do, to be able to get that brand recognition and to be able to say, oh, look at that, they have something local, and the site looks clean and fresh, and the experience is very similar. We haven't got it 100% right, for sure, but that's what this store optimization and digital transformation strategy will allow us to do, to be able to enhance that experience. Because at the end of the day, it's about creating an opportunity for people to spend less time on the road or in stores and spend more time with their families.
Right. And actually we'll touch on that as we go along, because I want to hear a little bit more about that in your context. I think, how people find balance and so on as leaders is a really important area to spend some time on. And so maybe let's kind of go in that direction a little bit around leadership. On the one hand, I'm a younger entrepreneur, or I'm coming up, or I have a side hustle, or I'm building a business and I'm trying to go, and scale up. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening to Alex, and, I'm hearing some transformation, but, he's coming from a bigger place, more resources, et cetera, et cetera. But I think one of the things that's kind of interesting about your experience is that, you're fairly young leader. You had experiences and mentors just even within the family, but you had to learn a lot of things as well because of the shift that you were taking. So what are some of the personal hurdles that you faced in kind of assuming leadership of this going concern and kind of trying to take it into a direction?
I think that one of the biggest things is when you're now starting off as an entrepreneur, and I would like to think that even though that I did come into a legacy business, at the end of the day, I had no money to start this business, and I was not allocated any money, even though I was a controller and CFO, right? The family above said, you're not doing this with any money at all, right? You have to use your own computers and do it yourself, right? So often find times what that means when you have limited resources in that area. Means that you have to put all the effort in yourself. And that can be taxing on the family, just as you said. But I think what we needed to do was to be able to, even if you're a young entrepreneur or you're in a legacy business that is trying to start something new, you need to be able to rely on your people and other people who have a similar goal. Because at the end of the day, you can't do it all yourself. And if you burn out and it's all resting on you, there's no way that, one, you can get the business up and running, and then secondly, you may not have a family anymore because you're so distant from them. Right. So in terms of the work-life balance, you need to be strategic in terms of how much effort do you put in, how much effort your team puts in, and if you had to do it, okay, I can take 2 hours from you and 3 hours from you and what have you, and then build shorter goals. And you said something that was very important, is having mentors. One of the things that I think as new entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs that are now starting and getting business is that there's so many things to learn. And if you can learn from someone who has made those mistakes, you can probably skip 1 or 2 steps. Because especially when you're now starting a family and you're now starting a business, resources are very limited. The one thing that you don't really have time to do or can afford to do is make all the same mistakes that other people have been made before in the past. So a key thing would be is to find mentors, and there are lots of different young entrepreneurial organizations within Trinidad as well as across the Caribbean that take young entrepreneurs under their wing and continue to guide them. Those mentors also have the experience and the connections to be able to put you into the right places. And so we've actually had a number of people that have come to us that said, hey, I would like you to give this young storybook reader story writer a chance, right? And yeah, and then we would place a couple orders and just to kind of get them on their feet and what have you. So those are very, very key things, and knowing that you can't do it yourself, and coming from the background and the cultural history that I have, um, we need to do it ourselves. But the reality is that what sense is losing your family and losing everything, when you can't enjoy the journey.
Yeah, and that's super powerful. So how have you kind of, in this time, you know, big change on the business side, stressful world, you like me have, family and young kids. How have you been kind of trying to keep grounded and and get some balance in there? What are some of the ways that you've been doing that?
I think it's from our boss, like our wives,
Yeah.
right? So basically, what the main thing for us is that we need to. Dinner time is an especially important time for our family, right? And we need to be able to come home on time. You can always work later when everybody's asleep, but dinner time and having that family connection, even as for those 2 3 hours, is extremely important. And when you take yourself out of that world and you put yourself into the world of like primary school or secondary school experiences, oh dad, I want to try out for this competition, at the end of the day, it's you naturally take your business hat off, put it aside, and say this is what is most important. And when you clear your mind from that and you have those connections with your family, it is certainly one beneficial, and then two certainly provides that mental wellness and that mental balance that you need as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think for a lot, one of my other guests this season, David Mullins, talked about the fact that the pandemic, okay, well, and it's been similar for me. You're in an office all the time and you're away, and now you're kind of around. And while that has some adjustments, somebody's going to pass in the background while you're on a video call, or some noise or something to handle. But there's also some really good benefits, right? You could be around more, you could interact in different ways, you get little, as I call it, like little doses of oxygen, both for you and for them. And yeah, I mean, and that certainly does help. So it's really important to kind of find ways to do that. I want to go in a different direction now around mission and purpose, right? You talked about it in a different way, but I really drew a parallel. When you're doing change management, when you're working through people, as you mentioned, it becomes really important to, as Simon Sinek says, to start with why. So when you think about purpose and mission at Excellent Stores, what is that for you? Where are you kind of trying to hone in and lock in from a purpose standpoint?
For me and my wife as well, one of the major things that we feel is really driving us and really is a major factor in our decisions is that we believe that we're stewards of this company. And there is a much higher purpose for everything that we do. So we've been placed into a position where we're fortunate the way we can hire 300 people and 300 families. And how then do we make an impact on these people? For both my wife and I, we've had many people impact us in powerful ways, right? And when you have those experiences, right, you can't naturally, naturally you want to be able to give that to others as well. So for our purpose is to be able to use it as a platform for good, for be able to get in people started. I think back to my grandparents and my parents. They grew up in a very poor environment. They didn't have anything just than shirts on their back and literally putting coins in a can. And that's how they save their money. I think that when I look back and hearing the stories of my grandparents and my dad as well, they were always people who were able to give a helping hand. And that's what our purpose is. Our purpose is to be able to help give people the opportunity to get a helping hand, to have a step up in life. So whether they choose to stay at Excellent Stores or they decide to move on and do something else, at the end of the day, it will impact in people's lives because it's not about bottom line and profits. We work with people every day. If we don't help people so that they can help others, what sort of society will we be? Right? At the end of the day, we will all have to meet our maker. And what am I going to say when I do meet my maker?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I hear a lot of sort of pay it forward elements inside there, which is really cool. Kind of like, you're gonna help, one set of people, give them a platform, they're gonna help other people, and that can kind of create this sort of ongoing expansion, which is really cool. When you look at Caribbean business, you've been touching a particular aspect of it: digital transformation, retail, etc. But what is a sort of a big audacious goal, from your standpoint, for the Excellent Stores group, and how does that kind of connect to where you think the Caribbean can go in the area of sort of like business and technology and so on?
I think my big, hairy, audacious goal really is to be the number one leader, an online retailer within the Caribbean. I do believe that our Caribbean identity, and as well as the physical logistics and customs and duties, and all the other tax laws that we have, does set us apart. Than if we were just living in the U.S. or Canada. So there's a lot of other elements, and I think that what we can probably do is that having a regional presence already and having the 62 years of history is be able to provide a lower cost of, a lower landed cost of products, whether on the retail side or on the wholesale side, to many other businesses and individuals across the Caribbean. So if we can be the number one online retailer, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have a physical presence.
Of
You
course.
use the you use the infrastructure that we have to be supportive of all the other businesses within the islands, whether it be individuals getting a lower cost item, or going to your local retailer, whether it be in St. Kitts or St. Martin or wherever it is, right? I can now use my economies of scale to be assist your business at the end of the day to be able to help your customers in your local environment.
Yeah, that's great. And it kind of causes me to think about the things that you have to continue to get good at, the muscles that you've had to build and will kind of have to continue to build over time. So how have you approached, for yourself, sharpening the saw and learning new things and figuring out these new capabilities, both for yourself as an individual and then kind of cascading that through your organization?
I think same thing. One is that I have a mentor in Canada, right? So being plugged in and connected, to what's happening on the global scale is extremely important. So that's where that mentorship comes in again. At the same time, with the outset of the pandemic, there's so many courses that are online, right, that you can take. I was able to get an additional certification where prior to the pandemic, I would have to fly, be away from my family for a couple of months. Now I was able to do that, just by doing it online and doing it from home. How we do that with our staff as well is to be able to do the same thing, is to be able to share the knowledge, whether you have a course, right, an internal course, or really at the end of the day is one-on-ones. Talk a little bit on at the end of the day in the afternoon, say, hey, this is where I think you could have done differently, and this is where we can help. And then as well, sending them on a variety of courses. At the end of the day, it's all about becoming and being aware of what's going on in your surroundings. And I think that with the additional infrastructure that we have now, and with online and all the news feeds that you can get a lot of the information, and you can be aware of what's happening around the world. The only thing now that you challenge before it was a challenge of, like, whether we flying to get the knowledge. Now you have to figure out, okay, what's real news and what's fake news. So
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. As we kind of wrap up here, I get a little introspective, as you think about lessons along the way. You've shared some great ones as we've talked. For those folks out there, and I always think that you can innovate in any scenario, right? You could be innovating. We talk a lot with entrepreneurs and business leaders, but people are doing innovative things in multiple walks of life, and in big corporations that they're trying to turn around. So I'm going to summarize for me, Alex, like the top 2 or 3 lessons that you would like to pass along to folks who are trying to build something, trying to create something, and they're meeting obstacles along the way. What are top things that you would kind of pass along to help them on their journey?
Sure. I mean, I think that when I think back to even this e-commerce transformation, which is probably one of the hardest things that I had to do within since coming back to Trinidad, um, really is that we needed to start off small. Don't bite off too much that you can chew. When we were launched this digital transformation, we also tried to change the entire business. We tried to change the logistics. We tried to get everybody understanding what data is when people didn't never use the computer, far less for data. Our website needed to be fully integrated into our inventory systems and every aspect of enterprise resource planning, and having a total all-in-one package to have everything. We did too much. And I think that when you're now starting off, or even if you're any project that you want or anything in life, it's better to be able to have those small wins, get engagement, rather than to force it down somebody's throat. Or if you're in an existing business, or if you're in a new business, trying to do too much will have unintended consequences, whether it be like your family, whether it be your time, your sleep, or your health. So the biggest thing that I learned was really is to get those small wins, right? Start off small and slowly build momentum as you get engagement, and as the reality is, and as the money comes in too. So that's the biggest thing. If you try to do too much, inevitably you will fail.
That's super. That's just like a super powerful thing. I mean, take those incremental steps. Crawl, walk, run, and you could build a great house, but you had to do it brick by brick. So I love that. Well, Alex, man, I mean, I knew it would be great. It was definitely great. Thanks for taking the time to hang with us and share some of your experiences with our audience out there. Really appreciate the time.
Dylan, thanks for having me, and it's been great to catch up with you as always.
Absolutely, man. All right, take care. That was Alex Siu Chong, CEO of Excellent Stores. You can learn so much from his story as he talks about principles, purpose, and having the willingness to rip up the playbook and not do things the way that they've always been done. Make sure you know the next time an episode of Uptick drops by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, share Uptick with a friend. Now, on behalf of Caribbean Ideas, this is Chike Farrell signing off. And remember, keep on ticking up.